Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending today's roundtable, Creating Sustainable Change in HCP Engagement, presented by Conduent. I'm Andrea, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Our speakers today are Sharon Rubin, Director of HCP Engagement Solutions at Conduent, and Dan McCormick, President of Generis Global Solutions. Just a few technical notes before we begin. This roundtable is being streamed through your computer, so there is no dial-in number. For the best audio quality, please make sure your volume is up. This roundtable is being recorded and will be available on demand within 24 hours after the event. Time permitting, we will follow the presentation with a Q&A session. Please submit your questions using the Questions and Answers tab on the left side of your screen. All right, we're going to begin now. Sharon and Dan are joining us. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
So we're going to jump right in with our first question here. What environmental trends have you seen that are impacting pharma sales and marketing initiatives? Dan, we'll start with you.
Yeah, it's obvious to start conversations like this around COVID's impact, right, on these trends. With the grounding of field forces back in Q1, we've learned a lot. ZS had some data out months back, 70% of field reps activity being assessed as half as what it was before the pandemic. And pre-COVID, 2/3 of all promotional and field engagements were face-to-face. Post-COVID, that's flipped. Now 65% are all virtual. That's from Accenture, a recent Accenture study. So we've had a real forcing function here for biopharma to build out its virtual and digital capabilities. And this is not only commercial, but also a lot of traction on the medical side as well. Biopharma, there's a focused effort to develop its field abilities to engage virtually, and there's also a trend toward building out dedicated remote/inside sales functions. So, with this, we've learned that there is increased not only provider responsibility, receptivity to this type of engagement, of course, but in response now biopharma is, of course, becoming more receptive. I was speaking with a field representative about 2 weeks ago, and it was part of an interview, actually, and the field rep said, I don't want to go back to 4 days in the field and 1 office day. As a result of this environment, the rep said, I'm finding that I'm actually able to get to some customers that previously I hadn't been able to get to before, and able to have more meaningful conversations. And I think we have some third-party data that also is indicating that the amount of time engaged with the productive virtual conversation is increased from 6 minutes to 19 minutes. This is Accenture as well. So a lot of impactful trends that I think we're finding some real silver linings to evolve our models.
So, Dan, I couldn't agree with you more about access. Pharma has struggled for quite some time with access, and COVID has only accelerated that. What I think we're going to see more of is more of biopharma exploring new channels in order to communicate with HCPs. But when they do that, they also have to increase their value of that communication that they're sending out to that HCP, so that we're reducing the amount of noise. What we're seeing is that there's a growing demand for cloud-based platforms that offer automation and AI and really take decisioning to a new level through analytics and enhanced analytics. This will really be very beneficial for marketing teams who need to find ways in order to coordinate multiple and disparate campaigns and coordinate their efforts in their communication to HCPs. And for sales teams, this will really help them in order to increase their collaboration with one another so that they can identify the next best action and determine, how to be most impactful to that physician. So what we'll see over time as a result of COVID, which has really accelerated all of this, is that there will be a data-driven approach to sales that'll be more coordinated with marketing through sales enablement type platforms. And pharma and biopharma is going to have to really come to a decision about how to be disruptive and innovative while driving growth in the marketplace today. In a conversation that you and I had, you indicated that 80% of HCPs do want to engage with pharma, but very few do. So pharma is going to have to figure out the best approach going forward. Back to you, Andrea.
Thank you so much for your insights. We're going to move on to our second question. How can pharma companies optimize their channel mix to increase HCP access?
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. Sharon, the last point about 80% of physicians wanting to engage with pharma, but only 20% do. That also is from an external study. And coincidentally, just last night, I think we were talking about 20 minutes ago, I shared with you, I was speaking with the chief commercial officer from an oncology company who, anecdotally, that's his data as well. He said 20%, his field team is able to only access 20% of the physicians that they want to access. The good news of the rest of that story is, 80% of the physicians see value in engaging pharma. They often just don't think it's worth the trade-offs of getting the information delivered, at the very time that it's delivered, that it's pushed, for example, and how it's offered. So, the question is around optimizing the channel mix. So really a couple of perspectives on this. For the multi-channel marketer, optimizing the channel mix means delivering the right message at the right time via the right channel, right? This has been the mantra for over a decade now. We've heard this with recent vigor and a high level of focus on impacting that patient and the provider experience here in recent years. From the general manager and the CFO's perspective, optimizing the channel mix is about ROI. So to get this right from both perspectives, biopharma needs to do a couple of things. First, do a real honest assessment of its capabilities. And then secondly, Sharon, as you've pointed out, do its due diligence in leveraging the analytics that are available to help inform how best to use those capabilities. Regarding the capabilities, we need to honestly ask ourselves, do traditional biases prevail within our organization? Are we still prioritizing, when we think about personal promotions, is it all about face-to-face engagements? If we're being honest about what we've learned over the last several months, I think we know now that it shouldn't be solely face-to-face, and there's good room for leveraging other channels. On the digital front, we need to take a look at how we're offering the data. Are we pushing to drive the dialogue, or are we setting up an environment where we're listening and we're listening to the conversation and adjusting the messaging to the conversation based on what we're hearing? And certainly there's a lot of avenues out there, a lot of media, so that we can tune in to what the providers and the patients are saying. So after we've done a real assessment of our capabilities, we're assured that we have the foundational elements of our necessary for our tactical plan in place. And to your point earlier, Sharon, it's really leveraging our data and analytics, and really a couple of them. Fundamental for a number of years has been the market mix analytics, regression analysis, which are standard models that really directionally help inform where to place your bets. across your tactical plan. Directionally, that's important. However, we don't just solely make decisions there. Fortunately, we've got a lot of other data, channel receptivity, for example, to help overlay on what we're learning from a quantitative perspective, overlay these qualitative insights that we have, that we capture from the field, for example, to help make even better decisions. And and then finally, the second piece crucial to the analytics is lots of energy in recent years around AI, and how can we best leverage AI so that in real time we're offering value and we're positively impacting that patient experience. Andrea?
That's great.
Yeah, I think we'll hear Sharon's response to that question as well.
Yeah, well, so Dan, I got a little bit excited listening to you because I think the key here is really around integration. Right? We have known for some time that pharma has had data living in separate silos, and there's been disparity against the data platforms that the data that we're collecting and the platforms that we store it in collectively. So when we start the process of integration, that really is the beginning of the process for creating a better customer experience, for creating the type of engagement that we want that's going to drive access and value. And when we start to create this integrated approach and this integrated view of the data, what we'll ultimately end up creating is a single view of the customer. So we'll get a 360 view of how that customer is responding. And this is where things are going to get really exciting. It's a game changer. We have known for some time that, digital marketers in particular have known for some time that, non-personal is no longer non-personal. It's very personalized. And we can use the non-personal channels in more effective manners if we were to personalize them and meet the customer where they are in their journey. So non-personal has transformed into multi-channel, which is now transforming into omni-channel. So if you can just imagine the power of that omni-channel engagement with an HCP, where we can start to communicate with HCPs where they are in their buying journey, and where they are in their engagement with your brand, we can really start to develop persona-driven types of an approach to dealing with HCPs and engaging with them on a very personal level that is meeting the customer need. Now, we have seen that there are smaller pockets and islands of success. Some companies, organizations have had some success in piloting initiatives. As we start to see the impact of COVID, there will be, I think, a greater level of receptivity around the budgets that they're going to need to reinforce the integration of this data. And the companies that really focus on this and do it well are going to increase access, they're going to increase value. Going back to some of those key points that you mentioned earlier, one of the key benefits is going to be in the advanced analytics that we'll be able to activate once we have all of that data integrated in a way where it's accessible. And in terms of data accessibility, the IDC survey with 155 reps, this is going back a couple of years, but I think it's still relevant today. They said that there are, this is 9 different data sets that reps have to look in order to get any insight regarding a target. And they said that if they were to have all of the data that they needed in one place, they would be effective, 35% more effective than they were prior. That means we have to get the data for them in an accessible way. We have to make it actionable for them. We have to give it to them in a format that's accessible and easy to use. And the byproduct of all of this is going to be around customer experience. So the end customer, who is our HCP, is going to benefit from this integration and the coordination of these campaigns, because we'll be able to speak to them through the channels that are most relevant to them and the ones that they prefer, the time of day that makes sense for them, and the hour that they're most likely to respond. We'll also be able to marry that with the promotional response as well as any anecdotal and behavioral data that we have coming in to feed those insights. So ultimately, what we're looking at is a system that can accelerate our growth It can help us to really target those hard-to-reach populations and those physicians that are treating them more effectively. Back
Great.
to you,
Thank
Andrea.
you for those. Thank you for those responses. Our third question here, with regard to sales, how can pharma companies improve their approach to drive incremental sales growth for optimal ROI?
Yeah, the last question, touched on this in a big way. So we talked about making sure that we've got the foundational elements in place, all the key capabilities. Do we have, the full suite of capabilities? And at a high level, that's field sales, table stakes, digital table stakes, and I would argue a dedicated virtual component as well, inside sales, remote sales. At a minimum, and as over time, I anticipate that all of our field reps are going to become hybrid reps, as we're seeing right now, which is very much the case. And so the other piece that we've spent a lot of time talking about is, and Sharon, as you just put a bow on it, the necessity for analytics. And I talked about market mix. You've talked about AI. So, specifically, in that context, if we want to focus on incremental sales and optimizing ROI, our math needs to be geared toward, I believe, three priorities. Simply, first, how do we efficiently increase our reach and frequency and the effectiveness, i.e. the value, Sharon, that you mentioned, of our brand interactions. And here we've got a large opportunity to have exponential increases in our overall reach and frequency. If we look across the various target universes that biopharma has in need, and the patients need, for their biologics and pharmaceuticals. So that's one. How do we increase reach, frequency, and the effectiveness of our interactions, looking for exponential increases? Secondly, there's a real opportunity to solve for success up front. We've loads of data, sales, channel receptivity. We've got internal and external ROI benchmarks to make some real sound modeling assumptions. And we've got a lot of rocket science firms out there, analysts, who can help us do this math. And it's worth it on how best to integrate alternative channels into our omni-channel plans. $25,000, $50,000 investment in analytics is well worth it in the context of a $10 million promotional spend. And so I think that rigor up front in solving for success to make for sound forecasts is well worth it. And then finally, it's the other priority for as we keep in mind where we want our math geared toward. It's how do we make the most out of our most expensive spend, and arguably our most valuable spend. And I've been in this space for a number of years, and behind closed doors and out in front. In spite of me being a big fan of alternative channels, I do maintain that our field force, both across commercial and medical, are our most valued assets. I cannot overemphasize this. I do believe that. And so how do we make the most out of that valuable field organization and free up that time to focus their efforts for highest impact? Do we want our field sales representative banging his head against the wall, trying to get into the highest valued prescriber or target if we've known for years that he or she is locked out? Do we want the field rep driving into a remote geography 3-4 hours just to see one doc? Are there alternative ways to set that field representative up for greater success? And the same principles apply on the medical side as well. as it relates to MSLs. And those are really the three priorities from my perspective that I think we need to keep in mind as we look to drive incremental sales and optimize ROI.
Thank you, Dan. Sharon, can we have your response to that question?
Sure. So, Dan, your points about the field being the most expensive resource is an important one. And the approach that I believe in my experience I'm starting to see with certain customers is that they're looking at the online and offline behavior. And we have to find a way to marry that data, because if marketing can adjust to the behavior and being able to target a physician and their point of engagement with content online, they'll be able to use that behaviorally to inform field sales and inside sales so that they can be more effective. So it's my belief that sales and marketing still have a ways to go in terms of their alignment, but the biggest adjustment is going to need to be on the marketing side. We're hearing from one of our data partners that the email open rate has increased by 300% post-COVID. Now, the numbers have started to come down just slightly, but they're still higher than they were in 2019, and that's only one channel. So if you magnify that and you really start to grow the base that you're engaging with over time, coming back to raising that 20% that we started talking about earlier and really drive to an 80% engagement rate, we really do need to find a way to integrate our platforms, to integrate our systems, to improve the effectiveness of sales through an adjustment and modification of how we market today. So what I think we're going to see is more use of marketing automation platforms, and that's really going to help to drive the ROI. On the sales front, it's been a tough year for sales. We've seen some constriction in the sizing of some field sales teams. I think we're going to continue to see that as we go into 2021. We still have to figure out what the right size is, what the right channel mix is, and what alternative channels make the most amount of sense. How do physicians really want to engage? We know that they're learning, as physicians are starting to use new channels, and they're becoming more comfortable with it, frankly. Sales enablement is going to become a more important key determinator of whether or not we're successful here. In order for us to be able to integrate not just the data, but to give the sales teams the content that they need based on that data. It'll be able to inform their insights, their dashboards, their reporting. We'll be able to serve up better content and content that aligns with the customer journey. What we're also experiencing, at least at Conduent, is we have a really great model for collaboration with sales teams. For inside sales to help to support field sales efforts through a complementary channel. And those that really work collaboratively have been able to grow their new leads by 12%. And that's pretty great growth that we are seeing, and we think that is something that is scalable and replicatable across platforms. Back to you, Andrea.
Thank you, Sharon. And lastly, for this question here, we have, what are some high-level considerations to prioritize when striving to create sustainable change?
Yeah, I mean, to me, this sustainable change is all about just fundamental change management principles. First, you need to make the change relevant, at multiple levels. And that begins with, just clarity around the vision. What do you want to do? Why does it make sense to the broader organization? And then specifically as it relates to the key functional stakeholders, what's in it for each of those individual stakeholders? From the GM to the heads of sales, marketing, finance, IT. That I think that's the first priority. It's critical to confirm champions at the top And so we've had a lot of this conversation devoted to sales, and I think it's critical, especially with the head of sales, as we look to evolve the sales model, that you have your head of sales as a champion. If he or she is resistant, it's going to be real hard to bring the troops along to integrate change and make for change, and rally the team around the vision. Make sure that we're not neglecting any key functional stakeholder as we're implementing the change. That we're not neglecting to bring he or she along for the journey, so that they're very much a part of the journey. We don't want to force the change. We want everybody bought in and along for the journey. And as you execute, we have to recognize, and biopharma has to, and we do, and largely we're seeing a lot of this. I guess this, in answer to the first question around trends, there's a trend toward increased outsourcing. Not every organization has obviously all of the capabilities and can do it all, and there's a recognition of that. And so it's prudent to rely on the core competencies of external partners, trusted partners. Find the best partner to execute the plan efficiently, effectively, and rapidly, in a way that you can scale. And then the final point, and I think this one's critical, and this one is typically, in my opinion, one that's often missed. To make for sustainable change, you have to make sure your operating model ensures year-over-year resourcing. That operating model, a couple of key resources. One, staffing. So what's that staffing model look like? Especially if we're talking about leveraging external organizations and partners. How do you work across organizations? And what's that new org structure look like as you integrate an external partner? And then, really important, and this one's very hard to solve for often, is how do you get the funding model right, where you've secured year-over-year resourcing. So in addition to committed staffing in that model, do you have committed funding beyond year one, where you avoid this flavor of the month, year-end brand planning, type of initiative, and you set up a plan that really helps institutionalize these changes. Brand managers, sales and marketing leadership, they change every few years. And everybody comes in with new ideas, and all these ideas are really good, and there's got to be a way, from a staffing and a funding perspective, to allow these good ideas to make traction and not become sunk costs, so that all that hard effort can make for some good materialize with some good rewards for the organization.
Thank you, Dan. Same question to you, Sharon.
So in order to create sustainable change, I think we're all agreed on one thing, and that is that technology has become an item at the top of our list right now. We're going to have to really figure out ways to increase our capabilities, leveraging the technology that we put in place. Now, some companies are moving towards a cloud-based platform. Others are looking at ways of automating if they've already implemented a cloud-based platform. But there's still many that are on legacy systems. So what we're looking at today is really a platform that is an end-to-end platform that is supported through enhancements that are driven by APIs, that are driven by partnerships. We're looking at an increase in the dialogue around whether you're going to buy versus whether you're going to build. And you really need to think about how you're going to offset your budget for that. Is it a buy versus build model? And every organization is going to need to come to a different a different consensus on that, and it's going to have to align to their strategy and the speed of which they're going to need to get to market. So I wouldn't rule out software as a solution today, and marrying that to human capital, and really trying to strike a balance between the two. When I really think about what's important today, we're at a time where we want to think big, but start small. It's been a really long time since biopharma has been in a piloting phase. So develop solutions that are modular in nature so that you can test and learn, pilot as you go, refine, and then drive towards scalability. We're really redefining the work. We're redefining the processes. We're redefining the way in which we engage. And the important point here is to focus the efforts on those areas where you'll find the biggest value and the biggest ROI, and that will drive the biggest success.
Thank you. We are now going to move on to the audience questions and answers. And there's still time to submit your questions using the Q&A tab to the left of your screen. We have lots of great questions already, and we will try to get to as many as possible. Our first question is directed to Sharon, and the question is, the person would like to hear specific examples of the approaches and tactics to connect with HCPs.
Specific examples, okay. Well, there's I think what's really interesting in today's market is that we've got more data partners who are looking at ways of engaging with HCPs offline. What seems to me to be really important is that we need to find a way to connect that data, connecting the online and offline content, taking data that informs you on how physicians are consuming content offline and online, and marrying that together and taking that and using that information to retarget with your field sales teams is one way in which I could see this this being very effective in order to communicate with HCPs. So it's about retargeting, it's about using information that is marrying online and offline content.
Thank you, Sharon. Our next question, how does pharma overcome the traditional bias relating to field sales, and what would be the first step?
Yeah, I can take that since I talked a little bit about traditional biases. A little bit of context I just want to share, just as it relates to where I'm seeing some of the traditional biases, where there's more of a tendency to hold on to traditional biases. With large established brands that are doing very, very well, first in class, no competition. I had one big top 10 biopharma share with me, we're knocking it out of the park with our sales number. The chief commercial officer is traditional sales leader, and in spite of our field force being about as productive in the field based on their data, the numbers are still killing it. And so there wasn't a real motivation to change things, and I get that. Why change if you're doing well? Nonetheless, I encouraged the head of marketing to just think about what incremental gains might make for other brands across the portfolio, et cetera. And then you've got smaller brands, smaller companies who are scrapping for share of voice, who there is more receptivity to try new things. So there, with some of the smaller mid-sized companies, I'm seeing a larger appetite for shifting some of the engagement models. Also, from a global perspective, where you have big biopharma, I do see this, who are looking to expand globally and their footprint, and with countries, and as they build up new business units in other smaller countries, and they try to do it cost effectively with very limited resources, there's an appetite there. So that's just broadly. I thought it'd be worthwhile to answer this question as to the context of where I find where we see some of the traditional biases prevalent and why. I think, how do you overcome this? I mentioned this earlier. I do believe that the head of sales is key. The GM, who certainly has accountability for P&L, those who have more P&L pressures are going to be more receptive to finding ways to do more with less. But at the end of the day, to make it most successful, I think it's the sales leader who can pull this through and really lead the evolution of its sales organization, beyond the traditional biases.
Dan, if I can add, the thing that keeps jumping out at me is that we really have to develop trust in these new methods and approaches for engaging with HCP. So it takes me back to really piloting, having a strong use case, and understanding that the competencies that we had in the past, either for sales or marketing, really need to evolve to meet today's needs. So it's a matter of piloting new initiatives, new innovation, developing a scalable approach, but growing and learning. And I think through that, we'll establish trust. And it's that trust that'll help us overcome that bias.
In the earlier question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. You made that point in the earlier question around the pilots, and that's a good means for getting comfortable for somebody who for those organizations where traditional biases are prevalent. There should be some level of receptivity to pilots, and pilots make sense regardless of the situation, to test it and feel comfortable.
Thank you for those responses. We have another question here. What role can or will contracted inside sales agents fill as pharma field sales teams build remote engagement capabilities?
Dan, maybe I'll take this one, since at Conduent we have an inside sales team. But the most important thing is to really integrate your inside sales teams with your field sales teams, and not to think of them as a separate channel. It's the integration of the channels, integration of all of these initiatives coming together and being seamless to create an end-to-end experience for those sales reps is what is going to really drive success today. So what we're seeing is that there is a need to increase the visibility of the interactions that reps are having with HCPs. Now, on the inside sales side, those are reps that are very comfortable working within a CRM platform. They have to log their data on a regular basis, and field sales teams have more autonomy. We have to find a way to provide more visibility into each other's activity so that we can drive effective communications with HCPs, so that we can determine the next best action, be more thoughtful in how we're approaching an engagement. And I made mention of this a little bit earlier. One of the things that have really come to light as we're starting to talk to our clients going into 2021 is a need for a complementary model. As field sales teams are and they continue to be the number one resource, the most trusted resource. We don't want to devalue their the wealth of knowledge and the way in which they engage with an HCP. Inside sales is oftentimes being used in order to help complement them, support them in helping to identify new leads, teeing it up for them so that they roll out the red carpet, and then the field sales rep or the hybrid rep, as Dan pointed out, is the person who walks in and drives home that sale. By doing that collaborative type of an approach and working together, sharing data, sharing information, we'll be able to get to the addressable market faster, identify targets faster, identify new leads faster. So that's how I see inside sales being very effective. But they can also be a supplemental channel for areas in white space and no Cs or hard to see areas where you don't necessarily have the resource anymore for a hybrid or a field sales reps. And because there is more use of virtual and digital types of tools today, both on the inside sales and the field sales side, we're seeing that inside sales is being just as effective in a lot of areas as field sales teams are.
Thank you, Sharon. We have another question here. Given HCP becoming a very crowded space, how does one decide what tools or technologies to leverage? And secondly, a second part to this question, but more importantly, how do we ensure data privacy and security?
Well, data privacy is something that's on the top of everyone's mind today, especially with GDPR and a lot of reform that's taken place this year. But there seems to be a growing level of comfort with how we're engaging with HCPs and ensuring that there is an opt-in in place. Sometimes there's a double opt-in in place. Largely, what you need to make sure that you're doing is giving an HCP a way to opt in and a way to opt out, that you communicate very clearly why you are engaging with them, and always give them the ability to, engage with you in the way that they want to engage. The interesting thing is that until we really get more automation in place and more of our platforms integrated, we won't really know what the best channels are to engage with HCPs. And I think as we go into 2021, that's where we'll have the biggest learnings. There's definitely a preferred channel that we're starting to see. Doctors, HCPs, they do want to engage with pharma. They derive great value from dealing with pharma. 80% of them want to and get the majority of their information from pharma sites or from medical sites, but the challenge of dealing with them and those engagements in a way that brings value is where we're going to have to place our focus. And I think we'll learn a lot more over the next couple of months.
Thank you, Sharon. Moving on to our next question. How do compensation models need to change in light of COVID-19 and other recent events?
Sharon, we've talked a lot about building out new capabilities, integrating new capabilities, and leveraging external partners. As we leverage external partners, table stakes, as we invest and build out new capabilities, our compensation models, continue to focus on sales growth. And so how do we drive sales? So as we leverage external partners and new capabilities to help drive those sales, we need to better enable our external partners to drive those sales by giving them the sales data. Oftentimes we set up partnerships with contract commercial organizations, however, to drive sales. We handicap them because we're not giving them timely sales data. I've seen situations where it's at best monthly. An Excel spreadsheet will get sent across the wires to show how the contracted team is delivering on sales. In years past, I've seen quarterly business reviews where you have the external partners' activity data, and then the biopharma sales data is merged the day before a business review in a PowerPoint presentation. So there, and that's changed a good bit in recent years, yet there's still a lot of room to help better enable our contracted partners with sales data so that biopharma can better hold the partner accountable for the sales growth. So the comp model still needs to be focused. I believe table stakes is sales. Let's better enable our partners. Number two, based on everything we've learned, we need to adjust our KPIs, our leading indicators. What are the activity metrics? Are we properly accounting for virtual engagements, the number of virtual engagements? Are we accounting for email interactions, etc.? So there's metrics that drive to that sales growth. We need to take a look at those and adjust the comp plans accordingly as we account for that. And then finally, another metric, and I think medical affairs is making more progress on this front with MSLs as it relates to field engagement. And this is something that I think we need to solve for on the commercial side is how do we define the value of a promotional interaction, beyond, so we've talked about sales, that's table stakes, right? We've talked about the activity metrics that lead to those sales, but is there something more qualitative, more meaningful for us to tease out the real value of our organization? On the medical affairs side, we talked, I think, up front earlier in the conversation around pushing, driving the dialogue versus setting up an environment where the HCP is pulling the information. Medical affairs, I think, is making more progress here as MSL teams are building out metrics, for example, that track a KOL, and in the context of a speaking engagement or an article that's published, did that KOL when discussing a disease state mention the brand? That shows that MSL delivered some value. It was representing that therapeutic area with which the biopharma's brand is serving. So is there something along those lines that we can push for to integrate into the compensation models as well?
Right. If I could just address that for a moment as well. Dan really hit on so many of the points, and I only want to reinforce that it really is about finding additional value that we're bringing to the HCP office, and that will take a little bit of time to learn, a little time to understand, a little bit of time to derive some insights to inform the new compensation model. What we do know is that inside sales has generally been very activity based in terms of their compensation model. It's the it's how many contacts, how many completes did they have, how many pieces of material did they send out. Field sales teams and hybrid sales teams are probably moving along some of those lines as well. And it's going to take a little bit of time until organizations and field teams get comfortable with that model. So maybe one way to to start transitioning that model is through kickers or other sales types of initiatives to start driving comfort in how we're compensating, because we want to ensure that people are aligned with the compensation model.
Thank you. And on a related note, what commercial insights and KPI should sales and commercial teams be more interested in?
Well, I'll take this if you don't mind. I really think it is about aligning that online and offline content, and as a result of aligning that content, your KPIs are going to become when did you engage with them in relation to that content, and what was your next best action as a result of that. So I think we're going to need we will see a closing of the gap in terms of the content that's being consumed and the content that's being delivered. And to me, that seems like a very viable KPI that we want to measure. Did you deliver the right message at the right time to the right HCP? And this might be a qualitative way in order for us to be able to achieve that.
Thank you. We have answered all of our questions today, and we had a lot of great questions. If we did not get to yours, we will do our best to get back to everyone who submitted personally after the event. Thank you for attending this Fierce Pharma Roundtable and submitting so many great questions. I'd like to thank our speakers for participating and Conduent for presenting today's event. The roundtable has been recorded. You will be able to access the recording within 24 hours using the same audience link that was sent to you earlier. Thank you again for joining, and we look forward to seeing you at future events.
Thank you.